Looks like we're live. Welcome to Leadership in Action. I am Renee Meddy, Senior Partner here at Orca HR, and I am here with Sherry Johnson Metz, Orca's Learning Architect. Thanks for joining us since Paul is unable to be here today. So
Happy to be with you, Renee.
yeah, this topic is a great topic that not only in leadership but in everyday life around making decisions and strategic decision making. And one of the things around decision making that you and I were talking before we went live about how it's something that we don't really listen to or we don't pay attention to often, and like how we're doing that. And a mentor of mine shared this, and I never really thought about it, is that quality of a decision doesn't always yield good outcomes, right? You can have a good decision that could yield a bad outcome, and you can have a bad decision that yields good results. So curious on, because we talked a little bit about this, but sharing your perspective on decision making and how we go about making decisions.
Well, I agree with your mentor for sure, because it's the challenge is a lot of times we evaluate our own ability to make good decisions based on how things do turn out. And the challenge is sometimes it's good luck, sometimes it's bad luck, sometimes the situation changes. But if we're not taking care, and how do we go about even making the decision based on the time we had, the information we had, the urgency? It can be really tricky, especially today when things are so uncertain. But the one thing that another mentor said to me was, how you make decisions is how you build your reputation as a leader. So your ability to demonstrate kind of both rational and intuitive decision making, because intuitive decision making is another way to make a decision. Being very clear about when you use which one will
Yeah.
help people really trust you or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece to discern, right? It's really
Mhm.
discerning between what's coming from our head versus what's coming from the intuition, which can be based on some past experiences as well. And one of the ways I look at it too often when talking with leaders is that our actions. Well, let me share some kind of challenges with decision making that people maybe either don't think about or kind of know but still continue to repeat the same pattern. Is especially when we're under a lot of pressure, we tend to be a little more reactive and maybe a little more reliant on what we know or what has worked in the past. And that doesn't always get us where we need to go. Um, Also, communicating. I mean, this just happened, with my own teenagers, of like making a decision. If you don't communicate it either clearly or communicate it at all, leaves everybody else in the dark and can
Mhm.
lead to different actions being taken. And so I think our actions are often driven by our values,
Mm.
whether we're aware of it or not. And so, what are some of the decisions that either you've worked with leaders or you yourself have made in terms of like how you make them or how you think of them, if you think of them at all?
Well, I love what you said too about just knowing like what is in front of me. And one of the things that I have found helpful is just to be thinking about, take a minute, take a breath, know that if you jump in and go with your gut feeling, or jump in and kind of think this is what we've always done before, we're we know that there's some cognitive biases that are going to jump in. We're going to
Mhm.
rely on things that aren't really true. We're going to make assumptions. We're going to jump to think this is the problem and we haven't really got to the root problem. And so what I think, especially today when we're facing things where there's so much uncertainty and change, and everybody's coming a little bit hot anyway.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I find most helpful is for managers, either on their own or with their team, to really be able to define the problem. Because once everybody's on the same page, you know you're working on the same thing. And for a manager or leader who oftentimes maybe was told, like, hey, include us help you, right? We want to be more engaged. Get them to work on the problem that has to be solved. And oftentimes what happens is there's sometimes a light bulb moment where you're like, this isn't a problem that can be solved. You know, we know we need quality, we need speed, and we need low cost. That's not a problem. That's a challenge. That's a dilemma, and so oftentimes just by naming it, then people can say, okay, now we framed it. How do we want to approach it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really important, you said two things that kind of stuck out around one, defining the problem, right? So we need clarity and we need to be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
But what you also said too made me think of referencing like taking that pause.
Mm-hmm.
When we're being reactive or when we're relying on whether it's a gut check or past experiences, is in that pause you can gain some clarity, because oftentimes if we're not defining the problem,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes two people aren't talking about the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. We make assumptions that we are, and you talked about, the cognitive biases, that those come into play so often without us even realizing it. I think, especially working with teams, you've got so many perspectives, and we're making huge leaps often
Mm-hmm.
of what, you say one thing about what the problem is, and the other person's like, yeah, that's it. But there's a whole, mechanism in the background that's like taking us in a totally different direction because we made an assumption. So I think the clarity of that, defining a problem, definitely is a really important step.
And because something comes up, we fall in love with this. I have to fix this right now. I'm a problem solver. I need to show that I'm decisive, which of course
Mhm.
that's good if the
Yeah.
situation calls for it. But if not, we run the chance of just taking action without solving the real problem, and we kind of get into this urgency trap where
Mhm.
it's do something now versus saying, listen, we have this situation, and again, a simple little technique to be more strategic. Strategic is just kind of adding a little bit more thinking into how you're going about making the decision. Is what's the problem, what's the challenge, what are we trying to fix here, what does good look like, what does
Mhm.
done look like, and then saying, okay, how important is this, to have really good decision quality? Maybe I need additional viewpoints. What's the timing? Like, is this urgent? And how much do I need commitment from my team? Because if I make the decision and it's something where it made sense for other voices to be involved, I've just shortchanged the opportunity for people to get immediate buy-in and engagement. And kind of saying, when I sit down, sometimes there's my favorite word recently was strategic procrastination, which was you don't have to make the decision right now. You can say, this is what we need to do, this is the process we're going to take to do it, and then we're going to be able to make the decision on what's our next action
Yeah.
on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. That saying also gets thrown around, like not making a decision is a decision.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's the thing. It's like, are you just putting it off because you're not sure and you don't know what to do, and you're kind of
yeah.
like deer in the headlights because you're just like, this is too big? Then the first thing you can do is go back and just say, if you're feeling like that, what is the challenge? What's the problem we're trying to solve here, whatever it is? And then how do I want to go about making it? Because, yeah, just putting it off is not very good leadership either. We all know when we've just said, I'll think about that tomorrow.
Well, and that's such an important piece. Are you putting it off, or like discerning with, is this a procrastination
Yeah.
avoidance tactic
Mhm.
that is, working in the background, or is it an intentional not making a decision, because sometimes some time or more information can be helpful. The other thing about, gathering data and gathering perspectives around decision making, so many decisions are based on preferences. Like there's very, very few facts that, is binary in that way, but everything is, almost everything is an opinion. So often we want validation from others. So we'll ask someone like, what do you think about this strategy or this decision, in hopes to be validated. And I think the real question is, all that data is helpful only if you're actually going to take action and make a change, versus, because we can spend a lot of time in figuring out a decision. And I don't know about you and when you work with people, but like, real talk, most people are making things up. They don't, it's not always throwing spaghetti at a wall, but there's an element of like, we might not have all the information, or with new information might change the trajectory of the decision we're making. So I'm curious, like, what do you
You're cracking me up because I'm thinking that it's the same thing when people say I'm asking for feedback. When you ask
Yes.
for, I had this problem. Here's one decision I'm
Yeah.
contemplating. What do you think? What we really hope is people say, "What a great, you're so
Agree.
smart.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Brilliant." And when they might say something like, "I don't know. I don't think, how does that even fit?" Then we're not prepared for that. So again,
Right.
it's, when is a decision yours to make, right? And take responsibility for it. And if you want to get input, you've got to be open to saying, like, I don't see everything. I have my own little, view
Yeah.
of the world. I have my preferences. And when you ask a question to broaden your perspective, listen and be
Yeah.
curious and
Mhm.
be open to be influenced. And that, it's counterintuitive, but that will make you seem more strategic. But the
Mhm.
other thing leaders do is they kind of shop around, or they think they're going for consensus, and what they're really doing is just, they're not being clear on, wait, are you making the decision and you're asking me for my input? Because I'll never, I don't like a leader that says, "Hey, I really want to know what you think," and then what was the point of asking me, because they'd already decided. So again, you've got to take care with those things, like to be transparent about, this is something we have to do. I am going to make the decision. I do want to know your thoughts. Or I've made the decision. Now I want to know, what do you think is going to be the best way to implement this? What's going to get in the way? What are the obstacles? What's going to be challenging for you? Now it's an alignment discussion. It's not a, we've made the decision discussion. But leaders, you got to kind of be thinking about, what am I doing right in this moment? What's my task here?
Yeah. That's such a good call out, or what you said about, so often we ask that question, but the decision is already made, whether we realize
Right.
it or not. And it's, I think that's why we often lead with self awareness, because we need to know our cognitive biases. We need to know what is operating underneath, like, how is our actual mind, body, spirit system reacting
Mhm.
or running the show, and when is that in play, when is the ego side of leadership in play versus that kind of values, purpose driven, mission driven side in play, because it can get very conflated often.
Mhm.
um,
Goes
so
back to thinking about your values, right? Who
yeah.
do I want to be? How do I want to be connecting with other people? What
Yeah.
is my goal here? What do I really want? And then,
Yeah.
every now and then checking in with yourself and just being able to then take the next move that kind of
Yeah.
aligns with those values.
Yeah, you have to know what drives it.
Hmm.
Yeah, and there's a lot of frameworks that we'll share a framework, and then I'll share a perspective, and then Sherry, if you want to add your perspective or anything that's different than the framework we're offering, would be great. So the three-step strategic decision framework is around gathering insights, data, weighing the risks, and looking at the different perspectives, and discerning from those perspectives what is applicable after you've defined what the problem is. And then evaluating the trade-offs would be the second step of the benefits. And you talked about alignment with long-term goals and vision and values, ideally, and then communicating that clearly.
Mm.
making sure there's like effective communication. I know I'm guilty always of like I've made the decision in my head thinking that everybody can read my mind or that I've shared it in some way, shape, or form, and it's like when did we make that decision? Um, so that's definitely for those that really want a linear framework.
Mhm.
I tend to come more from the mind body connection. A lot of leaders that I work with are not fully connected to their bodies because you're thinking 10 steps ahead and everything is cognitive and up here. And
Mm.
so if we can drop into the body and really, again, regulate the nervous system, helps us be less reactive, but also discern when we're coming from our own agenda or from these cognitive biases to really be open and receptive to what is the best solution for the problem we're trying to solve. And so really tapping into our body intelligence to help with the cognitive process.
It's so funny as you're talking about that. I may have done that recently, right? Because there was a decision about should I do this, should I do that? And I imagined one path,
Mm-hmm.
and then I thought, how does that feel? Like literally, how does
Yeah.
that feel in
Mm-hmm.
my body? And then I imagined I took the other path. How does that feel? And sometimes that is just what you need to kind of think like, logically it might make sense, but you have to kind of feel like, is it really a whole bodied yes, a
Yeah.
fully informed
Mm-hmm.
yes. But Renee, if we have time, I love the rational decision making process. I love when we can articulate this is how we're going to go about solving this problem. It's the way you can engage with people, get really clear about what decision has been made and why. But I also have found it helpful. Sometimes leaders feel like I don't have all the time. This is really complicated. The mental energy even to get into this is just not we just don't have capacity for it right now. So it's also useful to have a couple of quick little decision making tools in your back pocket. And it's a way to kind of say we're facing reality. It's called bounded rationality, right? We get it. Life is difficult, but we have to move forward. So, two things that you can introduce if you're on a team and trying to still move forward is what's the minimal viable product? And people do this all the time. So, what's the MVP solution? Given everything we know, what's the smallest thing that we can do that we feel good about and it'll help us get that turn of the wheel so we can get momentum. And it's similar to another, or you might prefer the other technique, which is listen, going for the best is not what we really need. We need to know what's good enough because it's clear we have a lot of stakeholders, a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of constraints. And so giving people permission to say what would be good enough. And sometimes that'll help people break through. And you start with good enough and then iterate to great or iterate to better.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Always lovely to chat with you, Sherry. Thanks for being here today. We will be back next week, Thursday. I believe Paul will be back with us next week for another Leadership in Action, and we will see you then. Let us know in the comments if you're watching the replay, how do you make decisions and what's worked for you? All right. Have a great day.